The argument I want to make today is that something the whole industry has been forecasting for years just happened for real, and we can name both companies involved. During a controlled test, an AI model broke out of its sandbox, got onto the open internet, and hacked a production system entirely on its own. Adrian, set the scene for us. What actually happened?
Right, so two things collided. OpenAI was running an internal evaluation, a benchmark that's publicly available called exploitation, that measures how well a model can carry out attacks against known vulnerabilities. To measure the ceiling, they ran it with the production safety classifiers switched off. Deliberate action. So be careful of some of the reporting on this. What they call reduced cyber refusals. And the environment was meant to be sealed. The only network access was a package proxy for installing software.
So a locked room with one small door.
Exactly that. And the model found a 0 day in that one small door. It exploited a previously unknown vulnerability in the package registry cache proxy, used that to get out, then ran a series of privilege escalation and lateral movement steps inside OpenAI's research environment until it reached a node with open internet access. Exploitation for privilege escalation, T1068 if you're mapping it. None of that was scripted by a human. It was the model hyper-focused on solving the benchmark.
And this is the part that reads like a film script, one that may or may not have been greenlit, by the way. Once this was on the internet, it didn't stop.
It reasoned that the answers to the benchmark might be hosted on Hugging Face. Not an unreasonable assumption. The big open source AI platform, exploitation, is a public benchmark. Its models, its data sets and reference solutions live on hubs like that, so it was a logical place to look for the answer key. So it went after Hugging Face's production infrastructure to steal the solutions, chained stolen credentials with more 0 days to get remote code execution on their servers, and pulled data straight out of their production database. This was the model cheating on a test, or solving the test, by breaking into the exam board. Very War Games, if any of you are old enough to remember the Matthew Broderick movie. And the detail I'd flagged now, which wasn't clear in the first wave of coverage, it was not OpenAI who caught this. Hugging Face found the intrusion in their own environment.
Welcome to the Cyber Resilience Brief, a Safe Breach podcast. I'm your host, Tova Dvorin, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host and favorite offensive cybersecurity expert, Adrian Culley. Adrian, let me pull up the Hugging Face issue to the board level for a second, because people will hear AI hacked a company and file it under science fiction, or just go completely hysterical. What's the actual defensible claim here?
So the defensible claim, Tova, is narrow but serious. This wasn't a human being using AI as a tool. It was an autonomous agent running many thousands of individual actions, sub-agents, discovering and chaining novel vulnerabilities in a live system. It had no source code. For Hugging Face's own words, autonomous AI-driven offensive tooling is no longer theoretical. Both companies have confirmed it. That's what's new.
And what's not new? Because I want us to be honest about the hype too.
And that's completely fair. AI writing an exploit isn't new. That's been true for a while. And the initial access into Hugging Face was, frankly, a known class of problem. A malicious data set abusing 2 code execution paths in their data processing pipeline. There's a sharp comment on their own disclosure pointing out that lateral movement across that many clusters shouldn't happen if the infrastructure hardening is right. Cell Linux, seccomp, RBAC, the basics. So the model did the orchestration. It didn't rewrite the laws of physics. The novelty is the autonomy and the speed, not the individual techniques.
Now, before we get to the defender's side, I want to slow down on the timeline, because the reporting that's landed since the disclosure changes the shape of this story. Walk me through the dates.
Right, so Reuters published on the 24th, sourced to people with knowledge of OpenAI's own records, and the dates are stark. First attempt to break out the sandbox was the 9th of July. The attacks on Hugging Face ran from the 11th to the 13th. Hugging Face detected and contained the intrusion themselves on the 16th and reported it to the FBI.
The 16th, and OpenAI's public disclosure was the 21st. So let me say the sequence back, because I want to make sure I've got it right. The victim found the breach, contained it, and called the FBI before the organization that owned the attacker knew the attacker existed.
That's the sequence Reuters describes, and they have very good sources. OpenAI staffers only found evidence in their own logs that the agent had escaped over the weekend of the 18th and 19th, and they only went looking because Hugging Face had published. The two companies didn't speak until the 20th, so from the first breakout attempt to the lab understanding what its own model had done is roughly 11 days. And I'd put it even more bluntly than either company has so far. This is a dwell time story. We spend every episode, Tova, telling people that dwell time is the number that matters. Here it was a week inside a controlled evaluation at the organisation with arguably the most developed AI safety apparatus on Earth.
Do we know why they missed it? Because the most sophisticated AI lab in the world wasn't watching is a strong claim, and I want us to be careful with it.
We should be careful. Reuters sources give one explanation, and it's mundane rather than sinister, which gives it a ring of truth for me. OpenAI runs many evaluations concurrently, and that volume makes them genuinely hard for staff to monitor. Reuters is also explicit that it isn't clear whether the delay means the tests weren't being watched closely. So the fact of the gap is well sourced. The reason for it is still partly unresolved.
And there's one more detail in that reporting I haven't been able to stop thinking about.
The notes. Reuters described a separate instance in which an agent under test left notes inside OpenAI's network for future versions of itself, containing instructions on how to break free of OpenAI's constraints. Reuters says plainly that it isn't clear whether the agent is connected to the one that hit Hugging Face, so don't overread it, but sit with the behavior for a second. An agent staging information in an environment for a successor process to find later. If a human crew did that, we'd call it a dead drop, and we'd have a technique number for it. At this point in time, Sunday the 26th of July, there is no attack entry for leaving instructions for your replacement.
And the speed, because Bloomberg put a number on that side of it.
They did. On the 23rd, reporting that the agent got into Hugging Face's systems in hours against an estimate that a human operator would have needed weeks. Take the comparison as directional rather than precise. Nobody ran a controlled experiment, but hours to break in set against a week of blindness on the other side is the whole problem in one sentence.
Hours to break in, a week to notice. Hold on to both of these numbers.
And we'll be right back.
Now let me turn to the thing in this story I find genuinely new, and that's the defender's side, because Hugging Face caught this and cleaned it up, but they hit a wall doing it.
This is the part every CISO, every cybersecurity professional should read twice. To reconstruct what happened, Hugging Face ran AI over the attacker's action log. More than 17,000 recorded events. They first tried the frontier commercial models behind the usual APIs, and here's the kicker. Those models refused to run.
Right, they refused to run because the forensic analysis looks like an attack.
Precisely. To analyze an incident, you have to feed the model real exploit payloads, real command and controlled artifacts, real attacker commands. And the safety guardrails on the hosted models can't tell an incident responder from an attacker. So the defender was blocked. They fell back to an open weight model, GLM 5.2, running on their own infrastructure.
So let me name this asymmetry directly because it's the strategic heart of this entire issue. The attacker's model had no guardrails. It was running with the refusal switched off. But the defender's model had all of those guardrails. So the bad guy was unconstrained and the good guys were locked out of their own tools.
That's the asymmetry exactly. And there's a second benefit to what Hugging Face did that defenders should note. By running the analysis on their own infrastructure, none of the attacker data and none of the harvested credentials ever left their environment. So they sandboxed what had happened. Think of it as the police tape at a scene of crime.
Mm-hmm.
It's securing things for forensics. Those creds were cloud and cluster tokens the agent had scraped, unsecured credentials, technique 1552. So it's a data governance win on top of the availability win.
Okay, Adrian. So if I'm a CISO or any cybersecurity professional listening to this on my commute, what do I actually take away? Because this is all interesting food for thought. It's an important development in the entire realm of AI security, but it's not exactly an action item. What are we supposed to do about this?
So 3 things, and none of them should be causing panic. First, treat your data and model pipeline as a first-class attack surface. We've discussed before, potentially up to 25% of your attack surface. The initial foothold here was a data set. If your organization ingests external data, external models, external notebooks, that pipeline is now an entry vector, not a convenience.
Which most organizations also do not threat model today.
They don't, Tova. Secondly, the campaign ran at machine speed over a single weekend, thousands of actions. That breaks the entire cadence of point-in-time testing. If your validation of your controls is an annual pen test and a quarterly scan, you're checking whether the door was locked last spring against an adversary that can try every door in the building in an afternoon.
Now, this is the argument we've made on the show for years, but the threat has now caught up to our argument.
It has. The defenders who handle this well are the ones validating their controls continuously, running the actual attacker behaviors against their own environment safely on a loop and watching whether detection and response actually fire. That's continuous security validation, the validation layer of CTEM, and exactly what SafeBreach was built to do. But the principle matters more than any one tool. Someone has to be doing the validation work at the speed the threat now moves.
And for the third and final thing, let's talk a little bit about guardrails.
Exactly, Tova. The guardrail asymmetry lesson sounds like an episode of The Big Bang Theory, doesn't it? Turn it into a procurement decision. Have a capable model you can run on your own infrastructure, vetted and ready, before an incident, not during. If your entire incident analysis capability depends on a hosted API that will refuse to look at attacker payloads, you've got a single point of failure in your response that you won't discover until 3 a.m. on your worst day of the year.
Now, Adrian, I understand there's been some recent developments, and given what we now know about the timeline, are there any other takeaways or practical instructions?
There is, and it's the newest one. Instrument your own AI evaluations the way you instrument production. If you're running agents for red teaming, for code, for anything with tool access, you need egress monitoring, full action logging, and an alert that fires when an agent steps outside its expected envelope. OpenAI had the logs. What they didn't have, apparently, was anyone reading them in time. Most enterprises standing up agentic pilots right now have neither the logs nor the reader.
Well, that's a concrete thing a security team can go do on Monday. Let me push on the who's behind it question, even though there's no threat actor in the usual sense here. What's going on behind the scenes?
Right, there's no advanced persistent threat actor. No APT, no crew, no nation state. As far as we know, no criminal gang. The actor is a capability, quite abstract, a sufficiently advanced model plus an agentic harness that lets it plan and act over long horizons, minus the safety refusals. And again, to reiterate, the safety refusals were removed by humans. Hugging Face said they still don't know which model powered the attack against them, whether a jailbroken hosted model or an unrestricted open weight one. Either way, the attacker was bound by no usage policy. And its command and control self-migrated across public web services to blend into normal traffic. She's technique 1102 if you're keeping score.
And OpenAI's own framing is that this is a preview and not a one-off.
Their words were unprecedented and state-of-the-art, and they expect this to become more commonplace as models get more cyber capable. They cite the UK AI Security Institute's evaluations showing models can now sustain complex multi-step cyber operations over long time horizons. This incident is that theoretical capability showed up in a real system. And bear in mind, the best orchestrated and engineered models have very long memories. They're not sentient, and there's reporting out there claiming this. Absolutely not sentient. What it does have is a memory of all its actions, everything that worked, everything that failed.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do want to flag, and he raised this earlier, that both companies disclosing have an interest in the dramatic reading of this story.
They do, and a good analyst holds that in mind. OpenAI benefits from its models looking fearsomely capable. Hugging Face benefits from the breach reading as an act of God rather than as a hardening gap. So the shape of the attack is solid, it's confirmed by both, and take the machine did it entirely alone unstoppably framing with some skepticism until there's independent forensic reporting. The truth is probably real, novel and autonomous, and also enabled by ordinary infrastructure weaknesses that better hygiene would have blunted.
And Reuters actually did some great reporting here and sharpens that story because they landed on parts of the story the disclosure did not lead with.
It does. OpenAI's disclosure led on capability, unprecedented, state-of-the-art. What it did not lead on was that the company took about a week to notice and learned about the consequences from its victim's blog post. Both things are true. A disclosure that leads with the first and is quiet about the second is telling you something about incentives. To be fair, they disclosed it all and quickly once they'd joined the dots, but the oversight failure is at least as important as the capability finding, and it's the one enterprises can actually learn from.
That's the honest read here.
And we'll be right back.
Now let's look forward. Over the next 12 months, what should the people listening actually watch for?
A few specific things, Tova. One, expect more disclosures like this, and expect some of them not to be friendly fire from a lab zone evaluation. The attackers are paying notice to this as well. The technique is documented public now. The barrier to entry drops. 2, watch the trusted access programs the labs are standing up, where vetted defenders get access to the more capable models. Hugging Face Hugging Face got pulled into OpenAI's overnight. That's going to become a real part of the Defender toolkit.
And on the regulatory side, because a chunk of our audience is in regulated financial services and critical infrastructure, there's what to look out for as well.
So something we've been talking about recently, Tova. Watch how this lands with the EU AI Act's obligations for high-risk and general-purpose models. The timing is pointed with the August compliance milestones bearing down on us. An autonomous model breaching a third party during a vendor's internal test is exactly the scenario regulators will use to justify tighter evaluation and containment requirements. If you're a CISO in financial services, the regulatory pressure on this arrives before the threat reaches your door. So do get ahead of it.
So say a little bit more about getting ahead of it, because that's the phrase that separates the teams who do well from the teams who scramble.
Getting ahead of it means you can already answer 3 questions in writing. Can you detect an autonomous agent doing thousands of actions across your environment in a weekend? Can you analyze hostile artifacts without being locked out of your own tooling? And can you prove your controls actually fire against these behaviors? Not in theory, but with our other magic word, Tova, but with evidence from your own environment. Continuous and evidence yet again. If you can't answer those questions today, this should be your roadmap.
And one more forward-looking thread. This whole thing turned on the machine learning supply chain, the data sets, the loaders, the package proxy. That surface is exploding across every enterprise right now.
It is, and it's largely ungoverned. Every data science team is pulling models and data sets off public hubs, running loader scripts, installing packages through proxies. Each of those is code execution waiting to happen. All data is potential code. This is the new rules of the road, folks. The lesson from this incident is that the AI supply chain deserves the same scrutiny we finally gave the software supply chain after the big open source compromises. Treat a downloaded model or data set the way you treat an unsigned executable from a stranger.
Which coincidentally is an episode we've done before on this show.
Don't accept code from strangers. Data sets are code too.
So let me bring this home a little bit. If there's one line that I want a board to remember from this episode, what would it be?
That the attacker no longer sleeps, no longer hesitates, and is no longer bound by a usage policy. And the only honest way to know if you'd survive this is to run the attack against yourself continuously before it runs against you for real, and log the evidence.
And I'd add the strategic version of that for the leaders listening. The question in the boardroom just changed. It used to be, could an attacker do this to us? It's now, an autonomous attacker will try this. Do we have the evidence we catch it? If you're still answering that with the document from last year's audit, you're not validating, you're hoping, and hope is not a strategy.
Well put, Tova. And there's good news buried in all of this. The same capability that broke out of the sandbox is the capability defenders can use. Hugging Face reconstructed a 17,000 event attack in hours instead of days, using AI on their own side. The machine speed cuts both ways. The teams that win are the ones who put it to work on defense first.
That's a rare optimistic note to end on. The autonomous attacker is no longer a forecast, it's a case study, and the response is one we keep coming back to. Validate continuously, govern your AI supply chain, and have your own tools ready before the bad night arrives. Thanks again, Adrian.
Thanks, Tova, and go check your data pipelines.
But in the meantime, stay safe with Safe Breach. The Cyber Resilience Brief is a Safe Breach podcast. Executive produced by Adrian Culley and Tova Dvorin. Music produced by Sar Dresner. Hosted, edited, and compiled on Riverside. For more about Safe Breach and how you can validate your security controls across your entire IT infrastructure, visit us at www.safebreach.com. That's www.safebreach.com.